How's it going, dudes? Welcome back to the worst board game of all time, Tournament 2. We have officially reached the end of the second round, seeing 16 more of the worst board games from around the world being eliminated from contention, while the remaining titles all take another step closer toward claiming the crown. But which of these games will be moving on and which will be heading home? That's what we're here to find out with the official declaration of the second round results. But before we get to that, it's time to check in on how close you are to taking home a title for yourself, the title of Bracket Challenge Champion. Before the second round began, we saw a new tournament record of 5 perfect brackets remaining after the first round, up drastically from the previous year's total of 0. These Fab 5, of course, top the leaderboard of the challenge for now, with a large list of ties right behind them eager to snatch their spot if they slip up. Big if there though, as they haven't been wrong yet. So let's check in and see if they can remain perfect by seeing which of our games are headed home. As per usual, I'll be joined virtually by my color commentator, Joshua Jacobs. Pleasure to be here, Cam. I gotta say, my bracket hasn't lost a terrible third game yet. Maybe I'll be the one going home with some group therapy. Well, Lord knows you need it, so let's go ahead and move on over to the big bracket to see which of these games will be moving on. Starting off in the Stink region, we will have a battle unlike anything you have ever seen before. The video board game Rap Rat versus the Vanilla Ice electronic rap game. This rap battle spectacular is brought to you by 2 hard-fought wins from our competitors, with the Iceman proving himself to be more impactful than the Civil War, and the Demon managing to best the Devil in a tough matchup for the Rat. In terms of the games that are competing, the Rat is one of the toughest players in this bracket, posting poor penalties, poor play, and poor approachability with the VHS requirement and the fact that many are not looking to invite a vengeful spirit into their home. However, 601 people were more than willing to let it take the top spot in their bracket. But the Thrilla of Vanilla has not made it this far on nothing, as his bone-dry gameplay and abysmal component quality has left aspiring rappers everywhere both shocked and appalled, to the point that only 5 people are still riding with the Iceman all the way to the end. Moving on to the next matchup, we will see one of the most anticipated battles of the entire tournament, Monopoly Cheaters Edition versus Ms. Monopoly. In the very first iteration of the Hasbro Bowl, this Monopoly matchup sees a clash between 2 games aiming for their own title of Worst Monopoly, going through their own trials in order to reach this opportunity. Monopoly Cheaters Edition is coming off of its first true test of this tournament, managing to hold off a strong woman and man in a tough struggle to nab its ticket into the third round, and bringing his 165 bracket believers along with him. Meanwhile, Ms. Monopoly has had no such trouble, managing yet another beatdown victory in its dismantling of Dave Ramsey's dead defense, much to the delight of its 43 bracket backers, or brackers. Being the first match in tournament history to feature 2 of the same game, this one is a lot trickier to evaluate than most. So in order to provide you with some deeper perspective, we're going to bring in our cheating specialist, Massacre's Mansion, to discuss his thoughts on the bout.
Thank you, Cam. 2 of the worst Monopoly spin-offs of all time, made during the same era, and you can tell just by looking at the changes made to the base mechanics. Houses were removed in both versions, leaving only hotels, aka headquarters. Railroads, aka ride shares, are also no longer purchasable and instead serve little to no purpose. Of course, there are several smaller changes as well, like different chance cards and whatnot, but do you want to know why I genuinely believe Ms. Monopoly is actually somehow a better game than MCE? Mechanically speaking, the Ms. Monopoly rules are clear and concise. Mechanically speaking, there is no gray area with the newly added rules. Mechanically speaking, despite how bad these new rules are, they function exactly as intended by the game developers. The same absolutely cannot be said for any new mechanic or concept implemented in MCE. Not to mention there are far more than 2 mechanics present that fail in this respect. I mean, on paper, I see no reason why MCE wouldn't win this match.
Alright, now hang on a second. Now I might have had Cheetah's Edition winning this one in my bracket, but honestly, I'm starting to think that I had it wrong. Now, no disrespect to Mr. Mansion here, but while he's focused on what's going on mechanically, I'm more focused on what's going on here conceptually. Cheetah's Edition may have fumbled what it set out to do, but underneath all that nonsense is an absolutely incredible idea. A monopoly that encourages you to cheat, that sounds crazy. Meanwhile, what are we working with on the other side? Oh yeah, the Hasbro-sponsored sexism simulator. Sign me up right now. Not only that, but they took that phenomenal premise and then proceeded to biff it so hard that it made it look like it was meant as a joke. Honestly, I have never seen a more bass-ackwards production in my life. And which would you rather play? A bad rendition of a good idea or a bad rendition of a bad idea? I wouldn't even give Ms. Monopoly a shot, and I don't think that it wants me to. No matter how mechanically shot MCE is, it just doesn't compare to the game that is unbalanced before the game even starts.
I'm sorry, how many infinite money exploits does Ms. Monopoly have? 0? That's less than 3, huh?
Yeah, but it does have some absolutely stellar wage gap advantages for anyone smart enough to be a woman.
Ms. Monopoly was smart enough to keep the well-designed and consistent property pricing system. Not MCE, though.
Cheetah's Edition at least kept its dignity when it made a board game that was meant to be played.
At least Ms. Monopoly makes you feel like you're playing a Monopoly game.
Ms. Monopoly makes me feel like I'm sitting through a student-led lecture. I haven't played any other game that feels this bad to get through.
How many games have you played where you have a chance to unintentionally flip the board? MCE is so desperate for players to take it seriously, it optimally and literally chains you to the game.
I'd gnaw right through that chain before I sit through a game actively telling me I am worth less than my peers.
MCE doesn't even tell you what it means to properly steal something. Would you pay more money for a spin-off worse than the original?
I'd pay as much money as I needed to in order to never look at her stupid little smirk again. Okay, this one looks like it's going to be an extended discussion, so to keep us on schedule, I'm going to take back over. With our Stink Region game set and Josh currently occupied, I'll run us through our terrible third matchups and showcase who I think will be moving on. This is a tough one to analyze due to how different these battles are compared to the rest, but based off of what we've seen from the games previously in the tournament, I think I can come up with a conclusion. Both Vanilla Ice and the Rap Rat have come into contact with tough matchups on their runs, with Beispielet and James Corden each managing to test their abilities respectively. However, only one of those games caused a controversy on its loss, Beispielet. And if the crowd thought that the Iceman should have lost to a 12 seed, imagine how they will feel when he goes up against the number 1 overall. For that, I think I will have to take the Rat to win this rap. But remember that the backlash from that match did not stop Vanilla from winning that one and another after. So don't think that there isn't the chance that the man can rise above and put this rat on ice. Meanwhile, in the Hasbro Bowl, it can really go either way. Cheaters Edition has won each of its matchups by a lot less than Ms. Monopoly, but that's partially because the self-made investment guru has yet to face a truly strong opponent like MCE did with Woman and Man. Each game has unique issues that are going to resonate with each voter differently. Therefore, I'm going to predict that once this one has settled, a representative of the Hasbro Corporation will be moving on to compete in the Queasy quarterfinals. I just have a feeling. Now back to my standard roll, 4 of our 16 terrible third competitors have been locked in. So with 12 more games ready to advance, let's head on over to the Stank region to see which of our games there will be moving on. Starting us off in the Stank region, we find 2 games that pretty much everyone was expecting to make it this far. Breakey versus Public Assistance. These 2 games represent both generations of tournament competitors, with the grizzled vet of Public Assistance continuing to showcase his tournament prowess by eliminating Russian roulette and losing Chupo $40, while the young gun Breakey puts on an absolute clinic with his second consecutive 90-point victory. This clash of old versus new is shaping up to be a solid showing due to both games hitting their strides at the right time to build up some good momentum. For instance, despite not having been talked about in nearly a year, Public Assistance is starting to remind the crowd of how bad it truly is. From the political weaponization of its theme, to its status as the only banned game in the bracket, to the contents of its components, which can range anywhere from hilarious to, Yeah, it has plenty of aspects that assist in it gaining more and more supporters with every win, including the 22 bracket believers that had hope right from the start. However, PA is not going against any common street thug waiting for a bashing here. He is up against the one and only Bray King. Bray King has hit this tournament both in stride and in the jaw, posting some of the most dominant wins in the bracket the first 2 rounds and setting itself up with an absurd amount of momentum heading into the terrible third. Any kind of defense posted for Bray King thus far has fell on deaf ears, as the title's sheer gall for pretty much every decision that it has made has outweighed any and all attempts to give its opposition a fighting chance. The game is so widely panned, in fact, that many people are already saying that there is no game in this bracket that can beat it, especially the 1,654 brackers that had it going all the way. But with experience on his side and a multitude of weapons behind him, maybe Public Assistance has what it takes to put these rumors to rest. Moving on to our other battle of the Stank region, let us bear witness to one of the strangest battles in the entire bracket: Right or Racist versus the Rock, Paper, Scissors game. These 2 titles have proven themselves capable against some pretty solid opponents, RPS living up to his seeding by conquering both Strip Tacto and his Diplomat Demons, and Right or Racist pulling off another massive upset in his thrashing of Bottle Flip the board game. With the introductions out of the way, it's time for everyone's favorite Right or Racist segment: Another Round, Another Clarification. Heck, I'm not even going to read this one out loud. I'm just going to put the findings of our independent reporter Dylan up on screen for you to read if you're an undecided voter. As I give you time to sort through his findings, let me explain what Right or Racist really is. It is a game that does not know what it is, nor what it wants to be. Bouncing somewhere between trying to be a controversial humor romp for the boys and a piece trying to get real conversations about stereotypes started, it, quite expectedly, does neither well and falls directly into the middle of the failure fault line. Every time this game shows up, we have to do another update. Not because we can't figure out what the game is, but because the game can't either. It changes its focus every other day. I absolutely hate this game. I hate talking about this game, and it's that kind of mentality that it inspires in people that makes it a strong competitor in this tourney, and what inspired 252 people to back this game as their bracket champion. But Strong has gone up against its opposition before and fallen all the same, as it is now going up against the winningest game in tournament history, the Rock, Paper, Scissors game. RPS has the most career wins out of any game in this bracket for good reason. It has negatives galore and nay a single positive to think of. We have been trying for nearly 2 years to come up with just one reason for it to exist at all, and every time our positive just falls apart. And that is why this game has been one of the most consistently solid performers in tournament history, and what led it to having 393 bracket believers put their fate in it once again. With the Stank region winners locked in, let's see if Josh is ready to come back in and give his thoughts on who he will have moving on. Yeah, Kim, I'm back. I'm calm. Let's get into it. So our first matchup has some real tricky aspects to choose from simply due to how weird each of these games are. I mean, which would I rather play? A game with 5 seconds of actual gameplay or a game specifically designed to spread a belief system? I don't know. The negatives between these two are not compatible at all. So what I'll do here instead is go a week early on my switch up and tell you why you shouldn't vote for each game. For Public Assistance, the balanced gameplay, whole package might not be good, but with the right crowd, this game does have some legitimately funny moments inside of it that could bring a nice energy to the room. Granted, if you remove some of the vile moments beforehand. Now for Breaky, there isn't a lot to really analyze here, but I do have to give the game credit for one aspect: the tension. The permadeath mechanic present in the keys is the game's biggest detriment, but in those moments leading up to and right before the battle happens, there is a level of stress and tension present within you that I have seen no other game manage to achieve. So for those seconds that you are actually playing, Breaky has an atmosphere that you can't get anywhere else. With these in mind, I think that this battle is going to come down to how much the audience values those seconds of enjoyment, and whether they fall into that group that can get any enjoyment out of public assistance. If I had to predict what the crowd is going to vote for, I think that they're going to keep their loyalty to the Break King. But if I had to pick a game that I would have move on, I'd have to go with public assistance here. After all, you're going to get more enjoyment out of a game you can only play once than a game that you would never play at all. As for our next matchup, I have no idea. What I want to say is that RPS has been too dominant, RPS is too consistent, RPS has so much in its arsenal that there's hardly a chance here, but I can't do that. Rhino Racist has so much momentum behind it that you cannot ignore, because no matter what we can or cannot figure out about the game, there is one thing that I can be certain about: it has that it factor. You can take one look at this game and go, yeah, that one's going far, without even a second thought. And it's got the tools needed to back up those claims, as we've seen in its big wins. This is a clash between two heavy hitters that are going to hit hard. But due to its experience, its history, and its momentum, I cannot see RPS going home here. The image just won't load. However, it's gonna be close. It's gonna be dang close. You can expect one of the most charged matches of this tournament right here, and also expect the comments under this one to be absolutely nuts on both sides. We've only got 8 winners left to reveal before we can officially start the terrible third. So let's head now to the bottom half of the bracket and meet those who will be moving on in the Stunk region. For our first matchup here, we'll see a bout between Bumps and Grinds and What Shall I Be, the exciting game of Career Girls. These two games are bringing the heat into their third matches, with Bumps and Grinds convincingly sending WWB home in the second round for the second consecutive year, and the Career Girls absolutely ruining my bracket by sending my boy Rat Splatter home in a contested game. This one is shaping up to be an excellent match, with Bumps and Grinds continuing to put up dominant wins to satisfy the 207 bracket believers that had it at the top, unsurprisingly mostly due to the arson angle that continues to push the game further into the bracket. But the real surprise here is the arrival of the Career Girls, who despite only having 3 total brackers and coming in with little hyper fanfare, has managed to showcase its skill set to the crowd and take down 2 games with pretty decent supporting pools, slowly warming up the voter base to the aspects that make it such a fierce competitor and stealthily rising to this level. Overall, this is a matchup that does not have a lot of fanfare, but does have a lot of intrigue that Josh will delve into later, as looking into this matchup a little deeper reveals an interesting perspective that could lead to an upset. But before we can get into that, we need to check in with the other matchup of this region, where we will find the diabolical matchup of Joel Harden's Mogul versus the Campaign for North Africa, the Desert War, 1940 to 43. Both of these games are coming into this matchup having beaten pretty decent competition, with the Mogul managing to stop the advance of Guy Fieri in a convincing win over Minute to Win It, and TCF&A TDW 40 to 43 sending home Mr. Bacon in a contested battle to make it to the third round. What we have here is a battle between games of similar skill sets, both relying on their complexity to push them forward as they offer a very realistic experience of their subject matter, paperwork and all. The Mogul has used this realism to showcase the most fun parts of real estate management, with HUD-2 forms and equity evaluations allowing players to experience the joys of bureaucratic paperwork from the comfort of their chair. A situation so mind-numbing that it has led to 75 bracket believers going all in with the Mogul as their final champion. As for North Africa, it basically is the complexity genre, forcing players to undergo every combat and supply chain process that commanders during the real campaign had to endure, including using paper sheets to track the deterioration of every vehicle under their command every time it moves, keep record of every plane and every pilot separately, and spend research and development time on exciting advancements like a 4% reduction in gas evaporation through updated fuel storage technology. The 10-hour per turn lunacy has led to North Africa becoming one of the most successful games in tournament history, and it will look to continue its run back into the queasy quarterfinals in order to show the 188 bracket faithful that they were right to have it going all the way. With the Stunk region team set, let's bring Josh back into the fray to see who he thinks is most likely to move on from these matchups. Yeah, Cam, this region definitely has some interesting brawls to go through, so let's go ahead and start up top for our first one. Now on paper, this matchup seems like a pretty easy one to pick. The Korea girls have seen some resistance in both of their matches prior, meanwhile Bumps and Grinds has had no issue dispatching of its competition thus far. We'll see a repeat here, let's move on. But hold on, wait just a second. If you've been watching the games, you might have seen some interesting developments begin to form, and those might come into play here for an unexpected twist. First off, the Korea girls are gaining more and more support on every advancing match. It's not like it's getting votes for nothing here, people are actively waking up and remembering how bad this title actually is, showcased by the fact that it has taken out some pretty solid games on its way here. On the flip side, Bumps and Grinds hasn't had any trouble cleaning up its matches, but who has it really played? A 16 seed followed by one of the most hated games in the bracket, he's yet to go up against a real opponent this tournament. Bumps and Grinds has not been tested this entire time, and while other games like Breaky are in the same boat, its wins are much more convincing than BG's. On top of that, while the title's game plan has been effective, it is also very shallow, as Bumps really hasn't been able to get the crowd to latch on to anything other than its awesome angle despite its best efforts. And if you start to look through those comments, some people are really starting to get a little fed up with this playstyle. Overall, I think that the Korea girls have a much better shot at taking this one than some might be expecting, which could end up leading to the exit of our very first #1 seed in just the 3rd round. However, Bumps and Grinds was put in this spot for a reason, and just because it has some troubles, that doesn't mean it's done for. So if the Korea girls don't come out there and give it all that they've got, they can very easily get swept up into this wall of fire and get burned. Moving down to the other bout, we see North Africa versus the Mogul, and I gotta tell ya, Mogul is not winning here. I had more faith in Mr. Bacon to beat North Africa than Mogul, and that comes down to one big reason. This matchup is horrible for him. The Mogul has some big negatives against him and is a strong competitor, don't get me wrong, but this guy's whole strategy revolves around the complexity and realism that it uses to turn players away. Now remind me again who it's going up against? Oh yeah, the Tom Brady of overcomplication. This man is really going into a complexity battle against the campaign for North Africa and expecting to not get circles run around him? There's no chance. I honestly believe that there's not a single game in this bracket that is a worse matchup for Mogul than this one. You'll be begging to fill out real estate financial paperwork when you're on your 7th consecutive hour of jotting down the vehicle wear after moving your car 30 feet down the road with 6 more transfers to go. It just isn't comparable. These two might play the same game, but they are not in the same league. So unfortunately, I have the Mogul leaving us here in the single unluckiest matchup I have ever seen take place in the bracket today. With that, we only have 4 more winners to reveal before we can officially begin the terrible third. So let's go now to the Stonk region to lock in our final games that will be moving on. Starting off in our top matchup, we'll find a tie-in tirade when the Lord of the Rings board game trilogy faces off against the Game of Life Target Edition. This matchup is brought to you by 2 different surprises. The first being the Lord of the Rings having a better performance in the 2nd round than it did the 1st, and the second being that tournament legend What Do You Meme is going home in just the 2nd round due to a massive target upset. Shaping up to be quite the strange battle, voters are going to need to decide which game's failures stick out more. LOTR's complete lack of replayability and newly discovered soft lock, or the Game of Target's corporate marketing ploy and devastatingly dull gameplay. Surprisingly, despite the seeding gap, these 2 games have the same amount of bracket believers at 25 each. So both of these squads have an equal amount to lose if their game fails to bring it home. And now going to the final matchup of the 3rd round, we'll see a stellar bout between 15 Love and the Dr. Laura game. These 2 games had much different experiences in securing their big upsets, as 15 Love swiftly surpassed the Subway Surfers on its way to a big win, while Dr. Laura had to fight off Special Agent Jack Bauer in a back-and-forth brawl to barely come out on top. Looking forward, the Biggs Laura matchup is shaping up to be a good one, as the Doctor's wild contents and questionable advice continue to push the game forward despite its tough competition, certainly making the 11 brackers it has happy with its performance thus far. However, 15 Love's continued insistence that dice are the best way to play tennis, alongside its complete lack of respect for your time, has given it the tools to excel in its matches. Hoping to keep up the good work in order to take the 25 bracket faithful that had it winning it all to the promised land. With our final region set in stone, let's bring Josh in one final time to give us his thoughts on the games he expects to be moving on. Yeah, Cam, I want to go ahead and get straight into our first matchup because there is so much to unpack here. First off, the meme machine is gone? In its first two matchups ever, the Game of Life Target Edition has faced off against a queasy quarterfinal and a shabby semis competitor and has managed to overcome them both. That is completely absurd and really shows how tough a competitor Target really is. Not only overcoming difficult challenges, but avenging his coach's loss from last year by taking out the meme machine once and for all. But Target is going from facing off against old titans to new ones, as it is now going to be going up against its first #1 seed, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. This game's story is just as crazy, as after a relatively alright showing in its first matchup, it came into the second and completely smashed Kong into the ground, joining the 90-point club and becoming the only game to put up that score in the second round after failing to do so in the first. This was definitely helped out by the discovery of the soft lock in its third game, adding another weapon to its arsenal and diversifying its skill set to add more variety to its play, upping its danger factor. But now that we've seen these two at their best, which one is going to be pulling off another big win? Well, while Target has managed to take down some of the largest profile games from last year's tournament, those games were mainly relying on last year's boons to carry them forward. If LOTR did not have that second round revival, I would probably be taking Target for the win here. But with how strong the trilogy is looking with the addition of the soft lock, I think Target's Cinderella story is going to fall to the Lord today. As for our last matchup, the Laura Biggs bout is pretty tricky to work through when working out what they offer. I mean, the crazed advice of a radio talk show celeb versus the worst adaptation of tennis, they have completely different flaws that make them hard to compare in this kind of space. So whenever that happens, I like to default to my old reliable. Which game would I rather play less? And if I'm being honest, experiencing the insane ramblings of a crazy talk show host sounds a lot more enjoyable than sitting through a multi-hour long dice rolling snooze fest. I'm sorry to the Laura faithful, it's been a good run, but I think Smart Tennis is going to beat out Dumb Comments 5 games out of 7 once again. And with that, we now know all 16 games that will be competing in the terrible third. But while these games are still celebrating, let's not forget those that caused many of our viewers heartbreak by looking at the most devastating losses of the second round. By far, one game that very few were expecting to leave the tournament this early was the meme machine himself, What Do You Meme? Fresh off a shabby semis appearance that ended with him taking home 4th place in last year's tournament, What Do You Meme is heading home in the second round, much to the shock of most of our viewers. This surprising development feels even worse for the 40 people that had this legend winning it all, who will be saying goodbye as we turn the meme machine off for the final time. Alongside him, some more favorites that we will be saying goodbye to include the 3-seed Bottle Flip the board game and the 9-seed James Corden Carpool Karaoke game. Both of these two got a bunch of support early for the craziness of their themes. Bottle Flip unfortunately not getting enough pointlessness behind it to beat out the racists, and James Corden unfortunately losing the worst host contest to the Rap Rat. These two ended up hurting quite a few people who believed in the wackiness of their titles, with Bottle Flip taking down 46 bracket believers with it and James Corden removing 50 of his loyal viewers from the pool. But among all of our second round exits, one game stood above the rest as the most believed in loser. WWB. The most hated game in the bracket, the one that was voted out, voted in, and then voted back out again, somehow had 52 separate people put it as their sole hope to take them to the top. Unfortunately, self-applied titles do not compare to real tournament championships, so those that believed in that world's worst board game title will only have that to fall back on in future discussions. Overall, these last two rounds have left 395 brackets without a champion, taking another chunk out of the bunch but still leaving 95.6% of the field's brackets intact. So far, really only niche picks have been taken out, with all of our favorites making it through to the terrible third. So we'll have to wait and see which of these high-profile games will be dropping off soon and taking their large crowds with them. Only time will tell, and looking forward, we still have 16 competitors that are still working their way toward the title. At this point, any frauds and flukes are gone, and we've reached the point of the bracket where wills are tested and legends are made. The terrible third is about to begin, so check out how your bracket is doing and be ready to vote once more for your least favorite titles. Let us know below if your bracket is still going strong, and which match outcomes had you flying, crying, or lying on the floor. Get ready for the third round as we get one step closer to finding the worst board game of all time. Signing off for the NBGA, I am KamSandwich. Thank you for watching and have a fantastic day.